Should MAID be illegal?
Medically assistance in dying is an option patients could ask for if they have an intolerable disease that causes intolerable suffering. A doctor or nurse practitioner would provide or administer a lethal drug to the patient where it would ultimately bring death.
This is Dave. Dave, unfortunately, has been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is a brain disorder that leads to shaking, stiffness, and difficulty with walking, balance, and coordination. The disease will gradually get worse over time. Because Dave's wife could not bear and accept Dave's disease, she left him. And that very same day, Dave was fired from his job. So the only place Dave could think of and resort to was the hospital.
In discussing Dave's treatment plan, the doctor explained possible treatments that would relieve his symptoms, but Dave wanted MAID. Dave wanted help in dying. Ethically, the doctor wanted him to reconsider, but as his doctor, the doc was required to tell him he was eligible and it was an option. Dave leaves to reconsider.
After Dave left the room, the doctor began to panic and freaks out, believing he has to kill Dave if Dave follows through with the plan. But then, a voice was heard.
It's MAID, it's not killing.
No, Doc, you're right. It is killing.
MAID is killing and needs to be illegal. Killing humans are wrong, right? It is, and illegal. And if killing humans are illegal, then MAID should be illegal.
But the DDE says otherwise.
The doctrine of double effect has two principles: direct and oblique intentions. Direct intentions refer to the purpose of the action, like how I want to hit the apple. Oblique intentions are the side effects of the action. You don't intend for it to happen, but you know there's a possibility of it happening, like hitting subconscious thing 1 instead of the apple. But DDE says, as long as harm isn't my direct intention, the action is permissible. DDE also looks at net goodness by weighing the amount of good and bad the action produces. If good outweighs the bad, the action is permissible.
This is not always true. Think about mass casualty scenarios, where all of a sudden someone brings out a bomb producing multiple victims. The doctor uses a triage system. They flag victims to determine who received treatment first. Yellow for delay, black for dead, red for immediate, and green for minor injuries. The time one gets treatment may determine between life or death, so flagging victims is like choosing who gets to live or die. One can be yellow at one moment and black in another. See, by placing these flags is the same as killing them, because you choose whose treatment to delay, and by doing so, it might cause negative effects. So here's the question. Why is it okay to kill in mass casualty triage, but not in MAID? The DDE will tell you why.
The doctor's direct intentions in this situation is to save as many lives as possible. And in doing so, not everyone will get a thorough examination. So the oblique intention would be the delay in treatment that leads to possible death. Killing was an oblique intention. Death is not the direct intention, but is foreseeable. And the DDE says as long as killing is not a direct intention, triage is permissible. DDE also looks at the net goodness, where more good is done because more lives are mostly being saved. The people with red and yellow and green flags. Since good outweighs bad, it's permissible. But what about in self-defense scenarios? So conscious thing 1 just killed the attacker. Why is it permissible to harm someone in self-defense, but not in MAID? Because the direct intention was to protect yourself, and the oblique intention was harming the attacker for self-defense. Harm is not a direct intention. Plus, good outweighs the bad here. As you harm the attacker, but you save yourself and maybe future victims from harm. Therefore, it is permissible.
And what about in brain death scenarios? What makes it okay to pull the plug? The machine keeps the person alive. Unplugging it would kill the patient. You see, for the patient, the direct intention is to end their long suffering, and by doing so, you would be ending their life as well, which is an oblique intention. In this case, the good is the quality of life. For instance, Dave's quality of life would be downgraded as the disease would disable his abilities for many things. Another good is people have the right to die with dignity. It is stated in India Supreme Court Article 21 comprehends dignity as its essential foundation, and hence, each individual must have the right to decide whether or not to accept medical intervention in case of terminal illness. Whereas in this case for bad, it means to not sustain their life and bring death. We cross out number 3 because for the DDE to say otherwise, there are conditions. Which depends on you, Doc.
So, Doc, what are your intentions? By giving the drug, is your intention to kill Dave?
No, providing the lethal drug, I want to provide reinsurance. It would give Dave the reinsurance that if suffering gets too unbearable, he will have this option to go on. I think it will also prolong his life because it prevents him from thinking he should end his life now while his disease lets him. And it promotes autonomy. It would give Dave control over his death. Dave would choose whether or not to take the drug, giving him freedom of outside influence or pressure. But even if Dave takes the drug, my intentions of reinsurance, prolonging his life of acceptable quality, and giving him control is fulfilled.
Sure then, it's permissible because harm is an oblique intention. But do you know for sure harm isn't a direct intent? Unless we unscrew his head and look inside his brain.
We can't do that.
Exactly. And what about net goodness?
That depends on Dave. It's good if Dave doesn't take the lethal drug because of reinsurance, prolonging of life, and autonomy. The bad would be if Dave takes the lethal drug. But some good also comes out of the bad, since Dave would die with dignity and would live full quality life, so MAID should be legal.
In Dave's circumstances, though.
The DDE would calculate a new moral status in other circumstances. MAID should be legal so that it is a possible option.
It shouldn't be because you don't know what the patient is going to do. It's different in brain death, triage, and self-defense. Through observation of injuries, the doc can predict if they can survive or not. You can tell the attacker is about to attack.
In brain death, we know the patient will not wake up.
In all scenarios, there is no other choice. But in MAID, there are so many unknown components, the doctor's intent, and if the good will outweigh the bad. So MAID should be illegal.
Dave, you're going to have to find another doctor.